Hey guys, it's Amber from Notable Ink, and today I'm sharing 7 reasons I love Slimline cards and think you will too. This video is part of the Altenew Blog Hop, so of course there's a giveaway. Follow my blog link down below and leave a comment on my blog for a chance to win a prize. While you're down there, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Okay guys, you know I love me some florals, but this Goldfish Pond stamp set was totally calling to me. I love how flowy the tails of these koi fish are, and I just thought it was a really fun stamp set that would go great with a slimline design. So let me show you the insert. Of course, in all of the inserts, you have loads of inspiration, different card ideas. You can actually cut these card panels out and use them as cards if you like, or use them as examples to help you with your layer stamping. Of course, this layer stamping is super easy. It's literally 2 layers to each fish. And of course, it gives you some suggested colors as well if you're stuck on a color palette. Typically a slimline card for me is 8.5 by 3.5 inches, and I have cut a piece of watercolor paper to that size. Now the first thing I like about a slimline design is that you can create so much depth in the length of the card. There's a lot more space to create depth. I have one of my favorite mediums, the Artist Watercolor 24 pan set, and if you missed my watercolor showdown video, I will link it in the top right corner, where I compare pans versus watercolor brush markers versus the woodless watercolor pencils. So be sure to check that out if you missed it. First thing we need to do is condition our stamp since this is brand new. Take a look at how shiny that solid stamp is there. In reality, they're all shiny, but it's easiest for me to show you on the shiny stamp set. So I rubbed my palm over it. Do you see how it's cloudy now? It's that cloudy surface that you want in order to get a good stamped image. Now, I'm not actually going to use that stamp, but I did want to show you how to appropriately condition your stamps. So here I have Obsidian Pigment ink. This is a beautiful waterproof ink, and it stamps really well, super crisp, and I love to use it on watercolor paper because I get such a good stamping with it. Now, of course, watercolor paper does have some texture and tooth to it. So even though this is a great ink, you probably will need to stamp more than once. I've put a little bit of seaweed on this side and the third fish, and I've pulled out a lid to my 5x7 porcelain palette, and I'll have all of the supplies linked below for you guys. And I'm going to start pulling out my colors. So I want a selection of orange and yellow. I have 2 jars of water, one to clean my brush in and one to grab clean clear water for my project. I'm going to add Fiery Sunset. I'm also going to add Pocket Full of Sunshine and Fall Harvest. Fall Harvest is warm yellow. Pocket Full of Sunshine is more like a lemon yellow. You can see it there. It's super, super bright. And then I'll add a little bit of Red Sunset. It's a warmer than like your Cherry Blossom, which is more of like a fuchsia. Okay, so these are the colors that I picked for my koi fish, and since I'm doing a watercolor card, I thought it would be appropriate to add some of the watercolor to these little stamps here. So these are going to add the detail to my koi fish. My slimline card is taller than my Misty here, so I just taped it down just to make sure it doesn't move. So I'm just going to add a couple layers. In this fish, I'm going to add yellow and orange so that I get a little color variation. And I also will add just a bit of black. Now here I use the Pocket Full of Sunshine, which ultimately I didn't really like how that color looked with the rest of the composition. It was so bright. Here I'm adding Rock Collection, which is a super, super dark gray, almost a black. And I'm going to change up that yellow a little bit later in the video just to warm it up a little bit. Here I'm just taking the Rock Collection directly to the card to add a little more interest. So here I have my heat tool, and I'm going to put it on the lowest setting because I don't want to warp my paper, but I want to make sure that these koi fish are dry before I start my background. I'm going to be doing an ombre background, and it's going to get super wet, and so I don't want that black and yellow to bleed into my background too much. Okay, so I'll start adding the blues to my palette. The first one was Deep Blue Seas. Then I'm going to add Starry Night. And typically I'll add a drop of water to the pans just to rehydrate them. I have Cool Summer Night, which is the darkest blue. And then I'm also going to use some Seashore as well. So I always start off with the darkest color. In this particular instance, my darkest color is going to be at the bottom of the sea or the koi fish pond. And so I usually like to draw the lighter color towards me. So I have my card upside down. I'm putting a layer of clean, clear water on the card because I want to make sure that I don't have any harsh edges. I want to try and prevent that as much as possible. So if your paper is wet, it's going to be a lot easier to prevent those harsh edges. So I'm going to start off with Cool Summer Night, which is the darkest blue that I have, and I'll start laying down that color. So let's talk brush size. Now, typically if you're doing a background, you want a fairly large brush so that it holds enough pigment and enough water in the belly of the brush that you can move your way up the background without having to reload pigment. But you also want a pointed tip because you can see I have these really small kind of detail areas in between the stamps and at the edges of the stamps that I need to get into. So a pointed round brush is ideal for this. I'm using a Wonder Forest number 8 pointed round brush. Now here my paper is starting to warp just a little bit, so I'm going to spray the back with water. I'm going to spray my glass mat with water, and this is going to act like an adhesive to just hold my watercolor paper down. This works great. I learned this from Lydia Evans. So as I said earlier, one of the reasons I really love Slimline cards is because the format of the card is allowing me to create this visual depth on the card with this deep blue sea. You're able to have that really deep dark gradient down at the bottom and use 4 different colors to create this ombre effect and this feeling of depth, like these fish are actually swimming around in the pond or the ocean or wherever they are. So that is one thing I really love about Slimline cards. The other thing is that you have more space to work with, so you can use more of your stamps and your dies and different elements on the card, which I find to be fun. Another reason I really like them is because for anyone who's not a card maker, I think it's still really kind of novel and unexpected to receive a Slimline card. Always really fun to get one in the mail, and so that's a really fun kind of surprise element. I'll play a touch of music while I finish up this background, and I'll catch you back in a moment to do the next technique. Okay, so as I'm painting this seaweed and these lily pads that are underwater, which is kind of weird, but they are, with green meadows, I love how it's bleeding out into the background. My background is super wet, you guys. Like, this paper is fully saturated. And that brings me to another thing I like about Slimline cards. There's a ton of real estate on a Slimline card, and it's going to benefit me for this next technique that I do. It gives you a lot of opportunity to play around with your techniques and different things. So I have the Altenew iridescent ink spray here, and I'm going to create some waves. Now, I didn't know that it was going to create waves. I was thinking more bubbles, like with the fish, because I'm going to splatter it on. But because this background is so super saturated, it's going to push the watercolor pigments away and bleach out those areas of the paper. So it's kind of like when you use your distress inks, if you will. You can use the water and kind of just disperse that out and bleach out those areas. This is going to add so much movement to the water, you guys. So I just kept adding it. I mean, I like literally splattered the heck out of this. Now I loved the look of this. So here I'm pouring it into a cap. This is the same spray, and I decided to add it to the tails, the fins, and because I have so much on my brush, again, it's going to push all of the watercolor pigment on the background away from the fish, and it's going to create this kind of like waves and ripples in the water. It's really cool. So I pulled out my Altenew metallic watercolors because I decided I needed a little more interest on the fins. I went with aquamarine metallic watercolor because I thought that would complement the seaweed and that little bit of seashore that I put into the water as well. And so the splatter that I put down is still moving. It's still moving those pigments away, and those waves are going to continue to get bigger. Now, I lost some of the depth of color down at the bottom here. It got really light. So I do want to go back and reinforce that. But even if you spent a lot of time on a piece, so really, okay, so I spent some time on this background, but it's really just a background, right? The stamping was pretty simple. So if I needed to redo this card because I messed something up, that's okay because it didn't take a lot of effort. It maybe took some time, but it wasn't hard to do. So those are the times where you really want to experiment. So don't be afraid of experimenting. Experimenting with your supplies is everything. I never would have figured out this whole wavy water texture thing I've got going on here if I hadn't have been brave enough to just throw the product on there and just see what happens. And so it's all about experimenting and just having fun with your products. So we're going to do that more. So we're going to add some more layers to this. So I pulled out my Starlight ink, which is in the same color family of one of the colors we used in the background. It's the Deep Blue Seas. And I'm going to use this seaweed stamp here. I inked it up. I'm going to spray it twice with my mister. It's just water in that bottle. And I'm going to stamp this right over the seaweed. So this is going to have a really cool effect. So my background is still really wet. It's super saturated. So I was trying to decide if I wanted the seaweed to go all the way down or if I wanted to wipe a little bit off. So I'm just kind of troubleshooting it now. And I decided I wanted to go all the way down to the bottom. And so check out what it looks like once you stamp it. I'm going to hold it down. And as I'm moving on to other ones, it continues to blur out and kind of just blend into the background. So you get this really ethereal kind of look to it. So I'm using Starlight, and I pulled out Galactic Stream also, and that's part of the Cool Summer Night family. So I'm going to stamp some of these right over the foliage that I already have there, and I'm gonna somewhat mask. I'm just going to wipe off areas because, I don't really love to mask. In any case, this background is so wet, masking paper is not going to stick. So there I got a little more blue ink than I wanted on the lily pad, so I just used a brush with clean clear water to get that off. So I think I'm going to stamp one more, and I kind of alternated the Starlight and the Galactic Stream. I'm going to put one more in the middle here, and I'll be done with that. So you have varying heights of those. And I think that looks so cool, you guys. Look at that effect. Really neat. I love the kind of layered look of it and how it almost looks like it's flowing in the water. So I threw some acrylic blocks on this and let this dry overnight so that it would stay flat, but let me show you these close-ups before I do the sentiment later. I just think this is the coolest thing. So you can see the metallic shimmer in there, all of those really blurred out, flowy layers, and I love the look of those waves. All right, I've got 2 more Slimline cards to share, as well as some more reasons of why I love them. And for these, we're going to be using the You Are Beautiful Stamp and Die bundle. This has a beautifully large bloom on it that you can either just use the outline or you can choose to do the layer stamping. I did do some layer stamping and die cutting today. I made a bunch of them, you guys. So you'll get to see that in 2 different colors. And of course, you always want to take a look at your layering guide, though I will tell you over the years, Altenew has perfected the layering to where it's so easy to line them up. I rarely have to look at the layering guide anymore when I'm doing it. Of course, inside the trifold, you have lots of inspiration and then some suggested color palettes. I'm going to go totally against the rules and use green on my flowers today. Not the leaves, but actually the petals, just to mix it up. So here I'm going to show you the conditioning again. So you can see how shiny that solid stamp is. So I'm going to condition the top just by rubbing my palm over it. I'm going to show you the difference. So the top is cloudy, the bottom is still shiny. You want to get all of the shine away so that you get perfect stamping. So I'm going to start off with Sweet Leaf Crisp Dye ink. So this is from the Green Meadows family. This is a cool green family and totally not traditional, but that's how I roll, you guys. I like to switch things up, and green flowers I think they're beautiful, so we're doing it. Next, I'm using Citrus Burst, which is from the Pocketful of Sunshine family, and I'm just going to use my microfiber cloth to take some of the ink off of the edges, and this is the solid stamp. I'm going to go ahead and stamp that down. The reason I took it off the edges is because I want to ink up those edges with the Sweet Leaf ink. So I'm back to the Sweet Leaf, which is what we used for the outline. I'm going to rock and roll that around the edges of the stamp. And I didn't want the yellow underneath there because that would change the color of the green. Those two would mix together, you'd get something different. Now my magnet blocked me from stamping all the way, so I'll just stamp that down again. And I'm going to stamp 4 of this color and 4 of the next color combination. I inked up the stamp again with Minty Mint, and I'm taking off all the ink except for what's in the middle because I want the middle of this flower to be a little more green, less yellow. Since my stamps are loaded, I'm going to do these 2 layers in the alternate colors, and I'm starting with Dewdrop, and this is from the Sweet Dreams color family, I believe. I'll do the same process where I take the ink off the outside of the stamp with my microfiber cloth. And here you can see that it doesn't really matter whether or not you start with your solid or your outline layer. If you're doing a really light color like this, it probably is easier to start with the outline, but I know that my stamps are already lined up where they need to be. So for this one, I'm rock and rolling the Sweet Leaf around the outer edges. And then I'll go ahead and do the outline in Sweet Leaf also. So on this one, so far, the only thing that's different is I replaced the Citrus Burst, which was the yellow solid color, with Dewdrops, which is that super light teal color. Okay, for the second layer, I'm going to ink up the teal flowers with Aqualicious from that same ink family. So I stamped this, and then later I will come back in and rock and roll Teal Cave around these edges just to darken it up. For the other combination, I'm using Sweet Leaf. So I'm kind of using Sweet Leaf a lot on this one. I was a little afraid of going too dark, but I do same thing. I will rock and roll just green around the outer edges of this, and you can see that now. So I'm really lightly tapping, and then you just want to make sure that you use your microfiber tool and get off any kind of harsh edges that you might get from the edges of the stamp pad. For this one, I'll rock and roll the Teal Cave. And that just adds that extra bit of contrast that really helps these flowers pop. For the centers, I'll use Teal Cave on the teal flowers and just green on the yellow and green flowers to darken up those centers. And then for the stamens, I'll use Fresh Lemon, which is part of the Pocketful of Sunshine, on both flowers. And then I'll go back to the darkest colors, the Teal Cave and the Just Green for the stamen details. Okay, after all of the stamping, it's time for die cutting with the coordinating die, and I'll just use some purple tape to get that adhered and run that through my die cutting machine. So I have 8 flowers cut out, and here I have the brand new Delicate Stripes washi tape. Check out how inky my fingers are. I can't help but get the blue inks all over me. So this Delicate Stripes washi tape is awesome, you guys. You know I love black and white stripes, and this tape is just the best. I feel like it's going to end up on all the things. I just love it. So I'm going to run it down the Slimline card here. Again, this is 8.5 by 3.5. And right now I'm adding one, but I do end up adding an additional stripe about a 1/4 inch apart from that one so that I have 2 stripes. I felt like it just needed a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and arrange these flowers. You'll have to let me know in the comments down below which color is your favorite. Most people think I'm crazy when I start using green on the flowers, but sometimes they like it. So you'll have to let me know. So I added some foam squares to the back of these, and before I use one of these extra whole flowers and cut that up, I'll go ahead and cut off all these parts because I'll probably have an extra piece to put up in that corner. Now again, this is one of the things I love about Slimlines is you can fit so many elements on a card, and the other thing is you don't need Slimline products to create Slimline cards. None of these are Slimline products. You don't have to have Slimline dies necessarily or anything specific to Slimlines. You can just use the products that you have. You can also kind of refresh your stamp set and make old stamp sets new again by just putting them in a different format. Here I have the Altenew 2-in-1 Precision Glue Pen, and I have a sentiment from the Essential Sentiment Strips die set. So I've cut that out of black cardstock, and I'm going to back it with a piece of white cardstock just so that it shows up a little bit more. When I put it just right over the flowers, it was a little jumbled and hard to read. So backing it with the white cardstock is going to make it much more legible. This glue pen has a ballpoint pen, and you can just press it down to get small dots, or you can just write with it like you normally would to get a full line. So I'm just going to play around with the placement. Let me know what your favorite placement was, if you liked it better at the top or in the middle. I preferred it down in the bottom third, so that's where it ended up. And I did not add any additional embellishments, or for the first time in I can't even remember how long, I didn't splatter this card. So there we go. All right, so check out the dimension there. It's not too tall, but I love that they sit up above that washi tape. And here's the finished card. I am totally loving these icy cool colors. I think they're great for winter or spring or whenever. Here's the second card I made. This brings me to my last reason that I love Slimline cards is because you have huge amount of white space. So I decided to crisscross the washi tape here and just add the flowers and everything in the bottom third. Okay, so let's recap. I think it's still unexpected to get a Slimline card in the mail. You have more space to use more of your stamps and dies. You have the ability to create such amazing depth on a scene card, like literally visual depth. You have space to experiment with new techniques like we did with the waves and the bubbles and the water. You can make old products new again by using them in a different format on a Slimline card. You don't need Slimline products, so don't not do it because you don't have those. And you have tons of white space to work with and to leave on your card. All right, that's all for today. I hope you guys enjoyed these projects. If you did, hit that like and subscribe button down below, and I'll see you real soon with more inspiration.